for Hughes.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Communications. Minister, I refer to the June 2023 report prepared by the late Peta Murphy, a report I signed concerning online gambling restrictions. In December 2023, the Minister said she would ensure a policy would be resolved, quote, expeditiously and would be announced, quote, without delay. It is now October 2024 and the government still has not arrived at a policy. With which elements of the Murphy report does the Minister disagree?
Call to the Minister for Communications.
Well, I thank the member for her question. I acknowledge her interest in this matter, as I'm sure all members of this place are concerned about the harms that occur when it comes to wagering in certain contexts. Of course, we understand, given the high level of community concern here and the fact that Australians lose some $25 billion every year in response to gambling, that this is an area in which improvements need to be made. So I commend the member for her work on that committee and all members of this place who worked on that committee report. There are three things I'll say to the member. The first is that this is a report that set out some 30 recommendations, many of which go to the interaction between Commonwealth and state governments and their regulatory arrangements. So we're working carefully through those with the states, and I'm doing that in conjunction with a number of other ministers, including the Minister for Social Services. It is a complex area in that respect. It's complex because there are certain regulatory arrangements that the states obviously have a keen interest in, but it's one where, of course, the Commonwealth wants to ensure that we have the most robust response when it comes to dealing with wagering harms. The second point is, of course, we know that given the high level of gambling harms, not only in terms of economic but social consequence, that we need changes that not only go to regulation and to law, but also go to cultural change. And the way in which we are seeking to achieve that is threefold. The first is breaking the nexus between sport and wagering. Second, it's concentrating on the exposure of children to gambling harms. But thirdly, it's also addressing the saturation of ads, particularly as they are targeted towards young men aged around 18 to 35.
The Minister will pause and I'll hear from the member for Hughes.
Thank you, Speaker. I take a point of order on relevance. This was a question particularly directed at the Murphy report, and I'd say that the Minister is not being directly relevant to what she disagrees with within that report.
The member for Hughes is entitled to raise a point of order. She's done so. I'll hear from the Leader of the House.
Just to the point of order, Mr. Speaker. The question it was quite a long question, and obviously the Murphy report involves a large assessment of a whole lot of issues on this topic area. And so, by virtue of what was just raised, with it being with respect to the Murphy report, that is in fact why the topic area is so wide.
I'll just make sure that the Minister in her answer is referring to either the recommendations or the topic of the report. I don't know what is every recommendation, I'll be honest with everyone, but I need to make sure that she's within the standing orders. She just can't talk about the broad topic. She was asked a specific question by the member for Hughes about the recommendations, and I'll just make sure that she's being directly relevant and that her answer continues in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The recommendations go to two areas. The first is in terms of reductions in gambling harms, and secondly, the way in which they can actually be implemented. The point that I'm making to the honourable member, and I know that she asked this question from a good place, is that we need to understand, but we also need to ensure that the impacts in responding to this report actually achieve their desired outcomes. And to give some example of that, the need to be forward-looking and comprehensive in this response necessitates a response that is really not only whole of government, but is whole of nation as well. We're doing this through looking at areas where exposure might not be prevalent yet, but could be in future, and we're also looking at areas in which we need to ensure that there is strong legislative response from the outset. So these are complex areas. We're determined to make a difference, and the status quo, particularly in relation to advertising, is unacceptable.
Give the call to the honourable member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister